Ever wish you could like really measure the mental side of sports?
Mm.
You know, not just the drills, not just the plays, but the grit, the focus, the team spirit, all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's what we're diving into today, and it's pretty fascinating stuff.
Right.
We've got excerpts from myPerforma, and they've created something they call, get this, mindset performance indicators.
Mindset performance indicators.
MPIs for short.
Catchy. Right.
And they're aiming to quantify what used to be, well, basically unquantifiable, the mental game.
Yeah, and it's really about going beyond the usual sports stats.
So no more just looking at points on a scoreboard.
Exactly. This is about getting to the why behind the performance.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. So walk me through it. What does this look like in action? Paint me a picture.
Okay, so imagine this. An athlete, let's say a basketball player, has just finished a really intense game.
Okay, I can picture it.
They're still hyped up on adrenaline, maybe even a little frustrated, right?
Yeah, totally.
But instead of immediately, dissecting every play with their coach,
Right.
they take a few minutes just for themselves to reflect.
Okay, so time for a breather. That makes sense. To kind of collect themselves. But what are they reflecting on exactly? Just how they felt out there on the court.
That's the thing. It's not just some vague, how are you feeling kind of thing.
No.
myPerforma uses these MPIs, these structured questionnaires that the athletes actually fill out.
A questionnaire. So it's not like they're going into this with just like a completely blank slate.
You got it. And here's where it gets really interesting. They fill these questionnaires out after the game.
After.
After the game, not before.
Hold on. That's different. Usually, I feel like these kinds of things are all about, predicting performance, right?
Exactly. You'd think so, but that's not what myPerforma is about. It's more about capturing this really honest self-assessment, after the heat of the moment has passed.
Oh, I see.
It removes that bias of like those pre-game jitters or even bravado.
Yeah, that makes sense. You wouldn't want to capture how someone thinks they'll perform,
Right.
but how they actually felt they did.
Exactly.
So what kind of questions are we talking about here? Give me some examples.
Well, they have athletes rate their own individual performance.
Okay.
How they think the team performed overall.
Oh, so they're considering the team dynamic too.
Absolutely. They rate things like how mentally prepared they felt going into the game. And here's the kicker, how physically prepared they felt.
Wait, so they actually separate out mental and physical preparedness.
They do. And they use this rating scale from 1 to 7 for all of these factors.
Interesting.
But it's not just about like feelings, although that's a big part of it. Athletes also take time to reflect on their strengths and weaknesses.
So they're rating their performance, how they felt, their strengths, weaknesses. It's starting to sound like a pretty complete picture of their experience, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't stop there. They actually break it down even further.
Ah.
They're asked about like concrete skills.
Okay, so like their shooting, passing, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But then also those less tangible things.
That's stuff that doesn't always show up on the stat sheet.
Yeah, like leadership, communication, all of that.
Right. Which can totally change the game, even if you can't quantify it.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that athletic performance is about way more than just physical abilities.
For sure.
And all of this data, the ratings, the reflections, it all gets like crunched together, right?
Okay.
To create what myPerforma calls a sports performance index, or SPI.
SPI, so it's like a single metric that kind of sums up all these different mental aspects.
You got it. And they generate this SPI for each athlete, which is already pretty cool, but
There's more.
here's where it gets really powerful. They create an SPI for the whole team, too.
Whoa, a team SPI. Okay, now we're talking about data that coaches can really use.
Absolutely. And not just for one game. Over time, all these SPIs create this amazing record of progress, you know?
So you can start to see trends, patterns, things that might not be obvious just from, like, watching the games.
Exactly. So you're not just seeing how someone played on one particular day, but how their mental game is actually evolving over the whole season.
That's huge.
It is. And think about the conversations this kind of data can open up between coaches and athletes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's not just the coach's gut feeling anymore. It's, hey, I've noticed this pattern in your mental psych factor rating before away games. What's up with that?
Oh, I see. So the data's right there, either backing up what the coach is seeing or maybe even challenging their assumptions.
Yeah.
That could be huge for building trust.
Absolutely. And it allows for much more targeted training too, right? If a player consistently rates themselves lower on leadership than their teammates do, boom, there's an area to focus on.
It's like MyPerforma is giving these athletes this whole new level of self-awareness
Yeah.
and then the tools to actually do something with it.
Exactly. And that's a big part of what's so fascinating about this whole approach, right? It's not just about like winning or losing, it's about understanding the why behind everything.
Okay, so let's talk more about that why. How does that actually play out in real life?
Well, remember those MPIs being filled out after the game? Imagine a younger athlete, maybe new to the team.
Consistently giving themselves low ratings on those leadership questions.
Right, right. So that's where those conversations with the coach become super important. Because instead of just saying, like, hey, you need to step it up and be more of a leader, the coach can actually, you know, dig a little deeper.
Yeah, get to the bottom of it.
Exactly. Like maybe this athlete doesn't really understand what leadership even looks like, practically speaking, on the court.
That's good stuff.
Or maybe they're, a little hesitant to step on anyone's toes.
Because they're the new kid on the block trying to figure out the dynamics.
Exactly. So these MPIs, they can really open up a dialogue, a whole different kind of conversation that might not have happened otherwise, you see.
I do.
It's about understanding the why behind those feelings, those self-perceptions, and then figuring out, okay, what kind of support does this person need? What kind of guidance can we offer? And that's especially important for these younger athletes who are like still developing that self-awareness.
It's like you said before, this isn't just about like the final score on the scoreboard. It's about personal growth too.
100%. And this is where things get, I think, even more interesting. Remember those 2K player leaderboards we mentioned earlier?
Yeah, oh yeah. Those are pretty wild. They sounded more like something out of a video game than, a sports analytics platform.
Right.
So how do those fit in with all of this?
So on top of all those individual reflections we talked about, myPerforma also incorporates this whole other element of peer-to-peer assessment. So they'll ask questions like, who are like the top 3 hardest workers on the team? Or if you absolutely had to win the game in the last minute, who would you want out there on the court with you?
Oh, wow. So now you're getting a sense of how teammates actually perceive each other, not just how they see themselves.
Right. Exactly. It adds this whole other layer of insight into the team dynamic, the relationships, everything. You might find that someone who consistently rates themselves low on leadership is actually really highly regarded by their teammates.
So the data could reveal hidden strengths.
Yeah.
Or maybe even some blind spots that nobody was really aware of.
Exactly. It just paints this much more like complete and nuanced picture, of the individual and how they fit into that team context. And that kind of information can be so valuable for everyone, for coaches, for players, really, for anyone who's trying to understand and improve performance.
I gotta say, this is really blowing my mind. It feels like we're finally starting to, acknowledge the mental side of sports with the same kind of attention, the same rigor and analysis that we've been applying to like the physical side for, well, forever.
Right. It's about time.
It really is. And I think for our listeners out there who are thinking, well, this is all well and good, but I'm not exactly out here training for the Olympics.
Right.
There's a bigger takeaway here. What if you were filling out these MPIs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
After, say, a big game
Yeah.
in your own life?
Love that.
What would be the toughest question for you to answer honestly? What part of your own mental game do you think you'd want to, measure or maybe even try to improve?
Right. What are those blind spots? Right.
Exactly. It's about that self-reflection. It's about growth. It's about like unlocking that inner MVP in all of us. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. Think about those MPIs, that honest self-assessment. What's the one question that would make you stop and really think? The answer just might surprise you. Until next time, keep jiving deep.